Welcome back, guys. This is going to be the fourth part of our video tutorial series that we are working on developing this card game, simple poker game using test-driven development, using both basically Mocha and Chai JavaScript Node test framework. Anyway, if you have been following along from the previous video tutorial, we wrote some unit tests to read the data file and then converted those data from the file into array of string. So here, basically, in today's video tutorial, basically we're going to split this data and then basically divide these raw data into cards among two players. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with the writing unit test. I'm going to name this file as a card provider. Basically, you're going to provide a card, hands of card for the two players. I'm going to rename this guy as a card. Oops. Provider test. This is going to be our test file. We're going to start with the test first. Okay, and get rid of all the previous. Okay, right now, perhaps I'm not sure whether I need a reference to card object or not, but I definitely need to have the card provider object, which doesn't exist. We will be creating soon. Let's say a card provider. And now let's set up our environment here. Let's describe what this feature is trying to do. Here, read all the array of text files. Array of records between two players. Two players and convert it to array object. Convert them into array of card object. Array of card object. This is our intent here. That's what we are trying to achieve. Let's go ahead and describe our first intention, first expectation. Expect to have each player to have 1,000 records or something like that. Okay, so as you recall from our last tutorial, because we need to pass this done also because we have our callback function, that is a method that provides the data for us. So since we need to have a reference to that, let's have reference to this object also. Let's require this one into our unit test. It's card file reader. Okay, so before I was talking to you, this framework provides a couple of hooks for us. Basically, those hooks are used to initialize the records. Or maybe if we need to create an instance of some object here, we can do those initialization inside this block of code. So for those people who are familiar with the XUnit or NUnit in server side, or JUnit or whatever, if you are a Java developer, they provide some kind of initialization code like a setup or tear down. That is equivalent to before each is kind of like that. So here, we can create instance of card file reader here. Let's declare a variables here for file reader or something. And inside here we can say file reader equals to new card file reader. This is okay. This is how we create instance of this object here. So once we do this one, we don't have to. We might have multiple each block here, multiple tests here, so we don't have to create instance on each of them. So now, we can do file reader. We'll have, of course, it'll have this method called read and pass a callback function to, because we need to grab the data from our previous method here. Okay. And inside, very first thing, we have to make sure we have to invoke the done method to take care of this callback feature of the application of the Node.js. And now, this guy right here, the card providers, which doesn't exist yet, because we'll be using this guy, would be responsible for performing this task that we have declaring here. So this is what I'm thinking. In here, I'm going to say my card provider. Oh, I'm using this being player card provider, because the new card provider is a card provider. Of course, into the constructor of that object, we're going to pass the data that we have from the previous object. Something like that. Once we have the instance of that object, all player 1 cards, player card provider, get all players, get players card. And I'm thinking something like that, because because we have a 2-player, first player and second player. First 5 record would be getting by the first player, and then second remaining would be by the second. So just to differentiate which card to give, so basically here this 1 refers to player card number. Okay, player number, something like that. So once we have data, very first expectation we should have we're going to expect this card here is not null or something like that, and I expect this to be an array, so let's also write that expectation. There's a method called is instance of an array. Alright, let's go ahead and run our unit test here. Of course, our expectation is it should fail card provider test. Okay, it is telling us, hey, card provider object doesn't exist. I couldn't find the module that you're looking for. So at this point, we have our unit test here. At this point, we can go ahead and start writing our code. Let's go ahead and add a new file into our app folder. Let's just use, and it's going to be card provider. Okay, now we have the file called card provider. Of course, now our errors should be different because it exists, file actually exists, but we still, our tests are failing. Of course, we don't have, our error is saying it's not a function. Of course it is not, we have not defined yet. Okay, let's go ahead and write a little bit of code here, card provider. We're going to follow the same pattern here. Let me say a card provider, and to the constructor we're going to pass the data for this object, and we're going to initialize our data by setting the constructor value. Okay. And one more thing I want to see, I give a name as get all player cards. Okay. Using the prototype pattern that we have been doing for all our previous module, we can give a method here, and this player number, because we are passing the number 1 and 2, that is referred to whether it's a player number 1 or player number 2, to distinguish between those two players. Okay, so how can we implement this feature? Let's write some validation code here. Player number 1 has to be, if it's a greater than 2, we got a problem because we only handle 1 and 2. Our expectation or the requirement only says we deal with 1 or 2 players. If that happens, we're going to throw the error here, okay? Just for now, because we might handle it a little differently, but that should be sufficient for now. Otherwise, let's have a reference to this object. So here, what we can do now, we can say self, we have a data object, and we can do for each in here, and let's call it datum. I think that is the plural of data. I mean singular form of data. I rarely use that variable, but since we are dealing with the data and one instance of a datum, whatever, it could have been written anything. Okay. So one more thing I want to do, if let's say whether we are dealing with player 1 or player 2, because we need to branch those logic based on whether we are dealing with the player 1 or player 2. So here, what we're trying to implement here is we have a card. Basically, we can give this 5 card for the first player, and then this 5 card for the second player. Let's just grab this record just for the references when we implement this one. Something like this. Okay, so cards. First player cards, that would be this is a string. We can do a substring here just to get the substring of the given string starting from 0. So basically there's a 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 of those, plus each of them has some blank space. That's one character. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to grab from 0 to 14, okay, for the first player. And for the second player, we are now dealing with the second player cards, and this is going to start with 15, and it's going to go to okay, all the way to the end. Okay, so of course, once it is called, we have to return some data. To do that, let's go ahead and define 2 variables here. First player's data. First player cards, I'm going to say it's going to be an array object, and we will have another variable. Let's declare another property here called second player cards. It's also going to be an array. So you might have guessed by now. So I'm going to do something like first player cards. I'm going to push those string. these two variable names kind of seem similar, so I'm going to first player card. Second player card, I'm going to go ahead and post that SPC, second player card. Alright, so of course now we have to return the data here. Once we basically come out from our loop, we have added all our separated data into first player's card and second player's card, and now we just have to say we're going to return based on the player number. If we are dealing with the first player, then we're going to return self first player cards. Otherwise, self second player cards. Okay, this is a very fast naive implementation. Of course, the module should be doing one more thing, because it has to convert this data into actual card object. Before doing that, let's go ahead and run our unit test. We wrote a bunch of code, let's make sure we don't have any error. Okay, it is telling uncode type error, card provider is not a function. Of course it is not, because we are writing Node module. Since we have not exported it, that's what it's complaining about. Let's go ahead and export this module. Card providers goes to card provider, something like that. Let's save it and run our unit test here. It doesn't have a method called push. Second player's card. Oh, that is undefined. Why it is undefined? First player's card. This method. It is defined, so not. Oh. Second player's card. Yeah. I don't know why. Perhaps I might have a typo or something. It is saying the push method is not defined. Expected undefined to be an instance of an array. We for some reason this is still not passing. So it is saying first player cards, second player's card. Let's our object, it's a returning undefined object for some reason. Let's see why. It's the first player card and second player. Second player's card, first. First player. I'm gonna say first player cards. Second player. First player cards. Okay, yeah, I have some singular and plural issue going on, it looks like. Yeah, okay, it's a passing now. So I have some typo here, okay? Sorry for that, guys. So okay, so at this point, so basically we have our records coming in, and the record that's coming in is an array, which is doesn't tell us that much, but also make sure we have all those 1,000 records for each player. And say the length of that guy equals to 1,000. Let's do this. Just make sure all those 1,000 records are coming out for the first player. Okay, that is good. So okay, that is our intention. Like our intention for this method was just making sure all those 1,000 records are is coming out correctly. Let's write another test here. Here our intention, what we expect player 1 should have only his card. So idea is like, I'm looking at this card for the first player. I just want to grab this 5 card here, okay? So we already did, we don't really care about this one, because we're gonna say now, let's say first hand of the player. These are all the cards. From there, let's grab the first card. Once we have our first card, then we can say, all right, the first hand of the card should be, let me grab all of these here. Alright, that also we have 2 unit tests, 2 of them passed. Let's grab one more. Let's test one boundary condition, the last one. That's the last card. So I don't know what the last card, we have to look it into the file, but it should definitely fail. Yeah, it is telling us it's a different card. It's definitely not the first card. So let's look it into our file. In right here, this is the oops, that's not. I just want to copy this line here. One, two, three, four, five. I'm going to get rid of those two. Alright, our 2 tests are passing. Basically, first card to last card, all reading correctly. Since we basically test the boundary condition, our assumption is like, if it's reading first one is okay and the last one is okay, all the middle cards should have been read correctly also. Let's write one more expectation here, okay, because this is exclusively for the first player card. Now we have to deal with the second player card. Player 2 should have only his card, that's okay, in this first hand of the player. and then first hand of the player is that, and we are saying the last one is that. But it definitely should fail because based on our data, they should have different card. They must. Why it passed? Oh, sorry for that, guys. When I invoke this one right here, our differentiator is the player number. I just still pass as 1 instead of 2. That's why it passed. I was like, why did it pass? Okay. Okay, not only that, when we call by 2, we have a problem here. This is like we have this variable called in our implementation. This is really cool when we driving our lossy by the unit test. It's also not only it catches all our logic, incorrect logic, but also the typo in our application. So here SPC is not defined. So let's go into this provider object and let's see why SPC is. Okay, see right here, I declare a variable as a SPC with a C capital, but I put this into SPC lowercase. Thank you, test-driven development. Okay, right now it's failing correctly because now it is expecting something else. So in our first case right here, let's go into card provider test, and if we look into our data, this 5 card, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's what it should be for the first card. For the second player, and for the last player, it should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These 5 cards. Okay, see, there is a still typo there because there is still problem because like this is telling us, right, it's reading it's reading 7D, 2S, 5D, 3S, and A because it's not reading C. That's why. That means our indexing when we wrote is not correct in our card provider here for the second player. We are saying starting from that, instead of this, we're going to say it's all the length. That's why it was failing. Yeah, so we have 3 unit tests and all of them is passing. Okay, that is okay. But however, our intent and whole purpose of this, one more thing it has to do is it should be able to convert each piece of a player's card, a player's hand, into actual card object that we have written previously. Okay. So to do that, so basically once I get this piece of a string, I should be able to convert that into a card object, and I'm going to push that card here. That logic, since like the converting a string to a card is like not the responsibility of this object, but get the card provider. Is now I'm going to give that responsibility to some other object. Hey, the cool thing about Node.js application is like you're just going to write just to give single responsibility to your object. So they only do strictly that piece of logic. That way, all your code is not in one file. It's basically very nice to debug, or because we can include. So it's always, whenever you are writing and you feel like those logic doesn't belong here, always good idea to put into sub into a next file. Okay, let's go ahead and write some unit tests that basically converts given a string. For example, here what I'm referring to, if I give something like this, it should be able to convert that into card object, and instead of returning me a string, it should return me a card. Okay, let's see how to do it. we always start with the unit test. Say input to card converter. Input to card. Something like that, and it's a test. Input to card converter test. I need to have a reference to card because here we'll be dealing with card. This also have a reference to this guy. Input to card. Okay, the purpose or expectation of this module is basically given the it should convert given string into card object or something like that. Convert card to convert string to card object, and we don't need any callback here, so we don't need to pass a done parameter for this callback function here. Okay. Let's define a variable input. New input to card. I'm going to follow the same pattern here, and to the constructor we're going to pass this string. For example, I'm going to, for instance, let's pass this right here. Well, this first card of the second player. That, and then we want to get array of cards, so input, I'm going to say a method called convert. This method should be able to convert the given string into card object. And we can now do basic assumption here, expectation. Okay guys, this is gonna be this has been a long video, so we will continue this one in our next video tutorial. So anyway, because a lot of people basically I'm going in more detail because a lot of people are not familiar with the test-driven development. I got a lot of emails from my followers saying we would like to do the implementation of whatever you have developed in detail. So that's why I have decided to go all the way. Anyway, I will be recording the next video whenever I have time. All right, thank you so much guys, appreciate it. Bye.